One chance, one life, one take. Little room for mistake. Who do you
Welcome to the Dead Funny, Dead Serious podcast. This is the series 30 End-of-Life Doulas in 30 Days. My name is Mitzi Weiland, and I'm your host for this series. Today, we have two End-of-Life Doulas. This is a mother and daughter, and we're going to welcome to the show Morning Star Holmes and Michaela Holmes. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be
Thank
here.
you.
Great to have you here. We are going to jump in because there's a lot to learn because this is a unique situation and I just love it so much, what you've been doing. So we're going to jump right in. Michaela, if we start with you on your why did you become an end-of-life doula?
So I started with Transitional Wisdom 2 years ago, which was my mother's business. And we just circle around end of life. So we work with people who are aging or ill and their families to do healthy aging, intentional aging, and then graceful transitions. And so this with COVID, I felt like I was trapped at home. I needed more interaction. And I was like, I've always wanted to do an end of life certification or an end-of-life doula certification. So I did the one at the University of Vermont. And I just loved the program. It was just like so thoughtful and sweet. And I learned a lot. And I love that there's such a wide range of what an end-of-life doula is. And it helped me kind of frame what we do at Transitional Wisdom, which is in a lot of ways, we're holding space and teaching skills to the family members so that they can be front and center, so that they can show up powerfully for their loved one. And it's something that we can do for our clients, but the kind of magic of showing up for the whole family unit allows them to have more control of the process of what does the last, 20, 10, 5 years of your life, or 10 days of your life. And so the calling, for getting certified was almost just kind of the cherry on the top, but being able to hold space for people through these processes and bring intentionality where when their loved one has passed, they look back and they really don't feel regret. Like they feel sadness and they cherish those memories, but they were like, I really showed up at the best way that I could.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like you do some family education, which sounds really powerful. Yeah. And I saw Morningstar, I saw you nodding for those that are not watching this, but are just listening. So where did you start, Morningstar? So what's your why and why you became an end-of-life doula?
Well, of course, it always starts with the personal story. But when my mom was diagnosed with dementia, I started being one of her caregivers. And I really learned what completing life with dignity was about through that process. And at the time, I've been an NLP trainer for, over 30 years. And so I just used a lot of my own skills to help her dive deeper into the stories that she would retell. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of the first part I started realizing. Her stories were about resolving things. And to have a good death is about resolving your life and your issues. And I've done training with Ira Byock, and he taught me a lot about when you complete things, when you resolve things, you have an easier death. There's less fear and less pain. And so I worked with my mom for a couple of years, helping her go to the places she had never gone when she didn't have dementia. And she had the most loving death. And it was even humorous. I mean, she was in my home, and it was like 2 days before her death. She was taking a nap. She wakes up and she has dementia. Remember, she looks around and says, "Am I dead yet?" And then she started laughing. And it was a way to lighten the mood, and to help us understand that dying is a transition. That's all it is. And how can we as family members support our loved ones to be able to have, real peace at the end of their lives? So that's why I started, developing my program, so that family members can start looking at ways that they can support their loved one as they're aging, ill, or in those final stages. And when there's stress in a family, you're a family therapist, all the stuff comes up, all the old dysfunctional patterns that you did when you were a kid show up. So we created what we call an emotional estate plan, helping individuals and families go through the processes to help them go deeper into those issues and resolve them so that they can shift those dynamics. And what's left in the end is love. And when people go through our process, they can be present with their loved one when they're dying without fear, without, bringing their own stuff into it, because they've already been working on it. And a good example of that is when I was a primary caregiver for my dad, and Michaela spent 8 months sharing that care with me. And my dad had a stroke, a massive stroke, and he had always said, if this happens to me, keep me home, keep me comfortable, and let me go. And so we were there with him for the last 5 days. He, was pretty much comatose. And I really encourage hospice. A good hospice is invaluable for people. And so our hospice person came in and had a nice conversation with me for an hour. And they had already said he'd probably live another week. And so right after she left, Michaela and I were in the room with them. And I said, hey, Michaela, want to play Scrabble? It might be entertaining for Granddad. And she says, well, yeah, where do you want to do it? And I said, well, let's do it in here, because that way he can hear us. And she was just getting up to get the Scrabble board. And my dad raised his hand. And he hadn't moved, in days. So we, of course, jump up, each holding a hand. And my dad closed his mouth, smiled, and didn't take another breath. And he had always said he wanted to say goodbye when he left, and that was his goodbye. So for me, being with people who are passing, it's almost like a portal. And it's so sacred. And that's one of the things that we do with our clients, is help them understand how sacred it is, so that you can support their leaving with love and, an open heart. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah. It's interesting to see you have a lot of hands-on experience through family, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And you're speaking my language with the family systems and doing this work up front, right? With all the death anxiety and the old stories and the old traumas that we have from death. And it is when we have stressors on ourselves, the old things that weren't resolved come up, and you're giving them that space to start processing and start working through that with you before the moments that we need to be present. That's amazing. So I heard a little bit about why and how you became this, and you were talking about Ira Byock, who is an amazing writer and physician for end-of-life care. Is there anything else how you became an end-of-life doula? It sounds like you created some products in there in this company. Any other great influences for you, Morningstar?
Well, I've done a lot of my own work. My own personal work, and it's part of being able to clear away the old stuff so that you can really be present. And so I've done a lot of stuff with Jack Canfield. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has been very supportive of my project. I've written a couple of books, and, he's been really a support for me in bringing them to life. But one of them is Transitional Wisdom, a guide to healthy aging and completing life with dignity. And part of healthy aging to me is about facing your death, because if you can, it's like today is a good day to die. And when people can be complete with their lives on every day, then every day's a gift. And so that's how I started really focusing on that family kind of thing. But I have to say, doing our personal work is the best thing that we can do for our loved ones.
Yeah.
So
amazing. Yeah. And you even wrote a book. We'll put a link and that title in the show notes. So if anyone wants to find that, they can find that.
Yeah, I have a second book as well, and that is the Transitional Wisdom Action Journal, and it's got processes in it that help people, like they can do it with their loved one, answering those questions, reviewing their lives, figuring out what they still want to do so that they can do what they're able and be able to plan for their deaths. So part of it is around asking those questions. What do you want? How do you want your end of life to be experienced by yourself and your loved ones? So anyway, that's part, we've wrapped it into the emotional estate plan to help people be prepared.
The more I do it, the more I hear from clients that they're so surprised when they start bringing up those questions with their family members. And they were like, I assumed that they would think this, and they thought something completely different, or that I wanted something different. And it's really important to put that in the room. And it sounds like you're giving these great tools for bringing it in that way. So amazing.
Yeah. I think that I'll just add, like, a big part of our work, and probably what found me here too, is like a deep belief and trust in kind of the human process of like the arc of development in your life. And so where things always where we find like they get sticky is when things are not said. Like, just like you were mentioning, those assumptions that family members make, or just not even having the comfort level with sitting, like asking those questions or sitting with the answers. And so one of the things that we do with families, it's really fun, is that we facilitate their collaborative family care plan. And it really centers the person who is aging or ill to talk about what's important to them and what they want. And it takes so much stress off of the family members, whether that's like biological family or chosen family, but it's like, oh, I can honor what they want. But like me guessing or trying to like be what they need me to be it's just so much pressure. And so there's like, I think of myself as kind of a late bloomer, and there's a million ways that I've gotten here, but it is around intentionality and just having the courage to have those conversations that are both really simple and really difficult to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding any tool and any people like you two that are willing to kind of walk with people and share that experience, it seems to be, that's the gift, right? Is offering that to people, because they don't know that you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know you need that until somebody is like, oh, here's this thing, and it will make your end of life easier and help your loved ones, right? And yeah, family of choice and family, anyone that's going to be around you, we're going to reduce some guilt, we're going to reduce some shame, and reduce death trauma, which is ultimately the goal, right? Is within family systems. That's my thing. You're going to hear it a lot in these podcasts, because it's really what we're working towards. Is if we reduce one death trauma in one family, we win. I set my goals really low every time.
It's so true. It's so, I mean, and it's a model. Like we found, like, I mean, part of our mission is kind of to naturalize this process of aging and death in a culture that doesn't want to talk about it or see it. But it's like, we're all going to go through it. And so like, I mean, we're really focused on the family dynamic, and there's a lot of ways in which that works super well. And there's a lot of ways in which that can be really difficult for families, but just bringing children in, like, to the process brings so much and educates them about what's possible for death, or is it something to be scared of, or is it something to sit with, to think about, to be sad, but also recognize that sadness is coming from like a deep sense of love and feelings of love that you can hold on to. It's I mean, one death I think is an amazing thing to strive for, but it's like just the witness of a good death triggers the possibility of however many good deaths. I think a lot of this movement, that's what it's about, is just kind of a proof of concept that a lot of people do know, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
To piggyback on that, when my mother died, my siblings were there with their spouses and their kids, and all their kids were teenagers. And my nephew, who at the time was 16 or 17, came up to me after my mom died, and he just said, thank you for having this here. He says, I was scared. I didn't know what to expect. And he said, being here when she died really made me realize there's nothing to be afraid of. And that's when I realized that working with the entire family can shift people's beliefs about what the dying experience is, and it can shift intergenerationally. My nephew will not be afraid. He'll teach his kids, as they lose their grandparents, that there's nothing to be afraid of. So
definitely systemically, it will just continue, right? Every time we have a healing in that family system around death trauma and death anxiety, it will expand. I love this work so much. Because we do have two people here today, we are going to make this a 2-part episode and keep you on the edge of your seats for the next episode. So stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to discuss the challenges and hopes of these two lovely people, Morning Star and Michaela Holmes. So thank you for this part. Again, all the information about Michaela and Morning Star are going to be in the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast and it is helping in some way, it would mean the world to us if you subscribe or like or leave a review or any one of those things, because it tells us to make more content like this. Then after you do one of those things, hop on over to Instagram and TikTok and tell us about you and what you want us to answer. That's all for this episode. We will see you in the next episode.